Hello, class. How's everyone doing? I hope everyone is doing well. This PowerPoint will introduce you to some of the basic fundamentals of the storytelling medium of graphic art, or sequential novels, or also just known as comics. As you can see from my personal collection, just a part of my personal collection there, I'm a fan of this medium. But one of the other things you might notice is that all of the comics displayed here are superhero comics. One thing I would like you to note about the book we will read for this class, Daytripper, by Fabio Moon and Gabriel Ba, is that it is not a superhero comic. So if you don't care for any of the superhero sort of nonsense that you think of traditional comic books, don't worry. Daytripper is altogether a different sort of story. It is not a superhero comic. So, look at the first few pages of chapter 1 in Daytripper. Try and notice two things as you look at these first few pages. Try to notice the content of the pages, the story being told, the words being written, and then try and notice how things look. Try and notice two things about the art. So, as we discuss this book, which I hope you will like, we will begin to discuss it in sort of the basic terms of comic books. Right? So, here are 5 key terms you need to know: panel, frame, word balloon, captions, and splash. First off, a panel. What is pictured here is a comic book panel. You may think of it more commonly as the little squares. So everything pictured here from this screen capture of Daytripper is one panel. It includes the words, the pictures, everything. So each little square you can think of as a panel. So much like we talked about with poetry with stanzas, or in film with camera movement and non-diegetic sound, this is a key term of the class you should start using in your discussion boards, reading quizzes, and writing. Number 2, frame. So if the panel is the entire square, one square of a page of panels, the border of the panel is a frame, just like if you frame a picture. Now, one of the interesting things about frames is, of course, they can be broken. So keep an eye out in Daytripper when you might have pictures overlap the frames, or when the frame is broken, or when the frame is fuzzy. All of this represents key points in the story, usually moments of intense emotional distress, action, impactful emotions, feelings, and so forth. Next up is the caption. The caption is the square here that usually represents the voice of the narrator or character thoughts. In Daytripper, we have a third-person narrator. All right? So this means that these are not necessarily the thoughts of the character that happen in first person. So we don't hear Braz thinking in the caption himself. We hear a narrator thinking about it. You will notice a caption because it will always be a square. Now, captions, which are a narrator's voice, are different from word balloons. Word balloons are how we can tell what the characters are speaking or thinking in comic books. The first one up here, the circle with the triangle, that represents speech. If a character is using this word balloon, then other characters in the book can hear them. If you see the second one, the circle with the 3 dots, that represents thought. A character is thinking this. That means usually only you and the character know what is going on. And finally, anything that is loud or broken or contains highlighted words, that might represent a scream when the character is yelling their words. So if we check out this panel from Daytripper, we see not just all sort of the way the panels are laid out. If you see, we have 4 panels running down here. Embedded in a larger panel split down here. So each one of these 5 things going down here, we could say are panels on one page, right? And then we see the word balloons pictured here during the robbery. Next up is the gutter. As explained here from a page in Scott McCloud's book, Making Comics, which I would highly suggest if you know anyone who likes to draw. It would make a great gift for them. The gutter is the space in between panels, right? If you remember, Gary Jackson, in the first poem we read for him, talked about the gutter of comics and how that's where our world bleeds into the comic world. What he was referring to is the space in between the panels. Any space in between panels is the place where your brain connects the images. So as Scott Limbo says, the gutter, here in the limbo of the gutter, human imagination takes 2 separate images and transforms them into a single idea. That's how when you read comic books, you can get a sense of motion, action, and a story. It's why we can call them a sequential art form, because even though it's just a series of pictures, your brain will take those series of pictures and fill in the gaps and place it into a specific order. So, for example, we can see a lot of this techniques put together here on this page in the end of chapter 1. We have panels on the side, we have the word balloons, all right? Look at the 4 panels on the right-hand side, right? That's a perfect example of how the sequential nature of the gutters, see the gutters in between each of the 4 panels on the side, helps you feel the building tension of the scene. You see Brasa's face, worried. You see the bartender's face saying, calm down, that he can help, all the way into the squinting eyes of the robber. We get a sense almost as if this is happening in a movie. Then another great example of the way gutters work to help create the sequential art form is, of course, the bang at the end of the page. Right? By looking at this page, you get a real sense of the dynamics of the scene, what is happening, as well as the murder at the end. Your brain puts together the story being presented from the artwork, word balloons, panels, frames, and gutters. The last one shown here is a splash page. That is when one image will take up the entire page. A splash page you can think of is the page itself becomes the panel. Splash pages also only have one picture. So if you look at the example here of Doctor Strange, this is one page of the book, whereas here, this we could not call a splash page because there are multiple panels on the page. Right, so just remember, splash page takes up one whole page. So, question. When you read a comic, should you read the words or pictures first? The answer is yes. All right. Language and drawings, the notion of comics exists in between those two, in the center of the Venn diagram. Words and pictures in the center can be anything. So if you should read the words or pictures first, that solely depends on you. But please make sure, and this is the key part to remember, make sure you are reading both. If you would like to look at the pictures first, make sure you are reading the words. If you want to read all the words first, make sure you stop before turning the page and look at the pictures. As long as you spend time looking at both the words and pictures, you are reading a comic correctly. So real quick, again, once referencing Scott McCloud's Making Comics, here are some rules he talks about as to how comic books work. Right? 1, like poetry, like drama, like film, right? Comics have a language and storytelling technique all of their own. In poetry, we talked about stanzas, narrators, the breakdown of the way things happen on the page. In drama, we talked about characters, dialogue, setting. In comics, it's the same thing, except with art. Just like in movies and stories, remember that every choice you see on the page has been a choice an author and artist have made to tell you a story. It's there on purpose. Now, like any artistic thing, there are no rules, but here are the rules Scott McCloud thinks to help you understand the fundamental techniques of comic books. First, moment. The choice of moment is what a comic book artist decides to include and what they decide to leave out. Remember, each panel is like a shot in a film or a word on a page. It's there to show you something, but also maybe not show you something. Second is frame. This is how they present the images to you. Are you getting a close-up? Are you getting a wide shot to take in a bunch of detail? Right? The way the moments are framed are key to letting you know the meaning of a specific page, comic, or story. Next is image. Pay attention to how characters are drawn in the book. That's the way they are described to you. Our main character, Bros, changes throughout his life. Notice how he is drawn. Notice how his father is drawn. Notice how other characters in the book are drawn. These will help you understand their character at the specific time in the story. Next is words. Just like any other written medium, books, novels, plays, poetry, the choice of words really impacts the story being told to you. I tend to think Daytripper has some beautifully poetic moments. Pay attention to those. Next is choice of flow. Right? Flow is how your eye is dragged across the page. Comic book pages are set up using their panels, frame, and structure to have your eye notice certain things, oftentimes in a certain order. Pay attention to that. As you turn a new page of a comic, when you look at the art, what is the first thing that jumps out to you? That is something important you should pay attention to. So, what can comics look like? Comics can be anything, from basic stick figure drawings, such as the one here by XKCD. Comics can be a series of photo essays. These were quite popular a while back. Now I think things like TikTok have taken its place. But this, which is a series of photos on the internet, is essentially sequential art, and sequential art is a comic. So what do you put in the boxes of a comic? You put in narrative arguments, arguing a position through relating to a story. For narrative arguments to work, you need the audience to believe your story and relate to it to have any sort of success of convincing them. To do that, you need to have a clear and compelling story, and that is what Daytripper will tell us. So please, for this week, make sure you read chapters 1 and 2 of Daytripper. As always, you can read ahead, but please make sure you read chapters 1 and 2. Stay safe, everyone out there,